Hey everyone, welcome to the Gloves Are Off podcast. I'm Mark Rizzoli. Today we have a great guest, a relentless defender of children and parental rights, Supermom Kristen Cobo. Thanks for joining us today, Kristen.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
Good. Today we're going to be discussing 5756, the dismantling of the nuclear family. And let's get right into it. Let's start with we have a State Board of Education's focus on ideology. Kristen, what would you have to say as far as the LGBTQT plus?
Yeah, so I think this is more about the state board's push for ideologies and indoctrination in our schools instead of focusing on bringing academics back to the basics. So what we know about our schools right now is we are failing our kids academically. And instead of addressing the concerns that parents have, academics, we are focusing on indoctrination and pushing ideologies and focusing on what they're calling the social emotional needs of kids over their education.
Do you think this is obviously it's deflecting away from the learning loss? But the thing that's disturbing, I get a lot of feedback on, people are like, no one is putting an emphasis on addressing the learning loss during the lockdowns. There's no money being invested in it. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Right. I mean, it's really doing a great disservice to our youth. We have last spring, 53 out of 106 school districts in New Jersey, they failed the state monitoring. So students were failing to prove to be proficient and move on. So instead of addressing this learning deficit, the state board got together and said, let's just lower the bar. So they lowered the standard to make it appear like these kids were proficient when they were not. So instead of addressing all of these academic deficits, we continue to push and have the focus on these social experiments.
Right. Well, they're definitely experiments. So, and then that could not have happened without the NJEA coordinating with the governor's office and the legislatures in New Jersey. I mean,
right.
You know,
I mean,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, I mean, at this point, 40% of students at the fourth grade level cannot read on grade level. Some of them can't read at all in America. This is atrocious. And then we have around 63% of eighth graders that cannot read on grade level. How are we setting these kids up for success if they cannot even read?
Well, yeah. Would you attribute to the fact that, unfortunately, like every profession, you have individuals who are more concentrating on their ideology and indoctrination as opposed to political ideology, of course. And also, would it be that they're more concerned about hiring activists as opposed to educators? Because that's what that's what a lot of people have asked me about. And I have to agree with the parents that, bring that up.
Right. And I think this is a loaded issue. And I think that it started in large part during COVID. COVID was a collective trauma. It impacted the kids, it impacted the parents, it affected the way we viewed the world, and especially kids growing up and navigating these delicate psychosocial stages of development. They're struggling. And of course, that impacts their ability to learn. So I think that we missed an opportunity to really address those issues in an effective way. And our government started ushering in all of these so-called ideologies and political pushes instead of saying, we're going to really be there for the kids, show them how to be structured in school, so show them what school's supposed to look like, and really bring them up to speed academically. Now, in our state, in order to address this learning loss, they lower that standard, and then they want taxpayers to pay up $50 million more to address this through supplemental tutoring. I mean, that's atrocious. So now our kids can't read in school, and instead of giving them the instruction they need, kids are constantly getting pulled out for mindfulness and for this social emotional learning. And I'm not saying that social emotional learning isn't important, but I think that a lot is being pushed through that category that students should not be learning in school.
No, I agree. When you see all this, debate after debate at school board meetings, it's focused on 57, 56, as opposed where it should be, okay, what should we have longer time for math class, reading, science? That's what should be being debated right now, not about gender affirming care, LGBTQT
Right.
plus 57, 56,
Right.
And I want to get into this because I know this is your field.
Yeah.
Do you feel that the mental health crisis that was created by isolation with children hasn't not been addressed by the governor's office, by the New Jersey State Department of Education, the NJEA? It doesn't seem like there's a big concern for that.
Right. No, there isn't. There's such a focus on the LGBTQIA plus group. There is what we're seeing, a huge social contagion. And you look at the percentage increase of children who identify on that spectrum, and it's an unnatural increase. So when we're looking at not only the collective trauma that kids experienced during COVID, we're looking at this 5756, which I know you did a podcast about this previously, but it's a policy that enables school districts to really take ownership. I mean, the one side is saying it's there for the protection of students in this protected class, but we have other protections for all students. So these students are protected under the Anti-Discrimination Act. So we don't need this separate standard that has dangerous parts specifically that says that a child can go to their school official, whether it's a teacher, a counselor, a principal, whoever it may be, and disclose that maybe they are struggling with their gender identity. And that school official can affirm their gender right then and there and not tell their parents. So at that point, that social transition starts. They start a separate file for that child, unbeknownst to the parents, and then continue on their way to affirm and alter this child's psyche without the parents being aware. This is dangerous on so many levels. One of the things that scares me the most as a mental health professional is that being somebody that's treated countless children with gender identity issues, transgender children, they are struggling during some of the most difficult psychosocial stages of development. So these kids, of course, as a teenager, you're not sure who you are yet. So you start having that inner conflict. And we talked about the other struggles that these kids have been through. And then you start affirming that without understanding or knowing what that child's been through. So in my experience, I see a lot of trauma and trauma during these critical years disrupts those stages of development. So essentially, I don't want to get too complex here, but when you experience a trauma during one of these critical psychosocial stages of development, that growth does not occur. So you may struggle to effectively navigate that stage. And then, of course, you're going to question yourself. Of course, you're going to try to find where you belong. Of course, you're not going to know who you are. So instead of getting kids the appropriate mental health care that really helps them navigate and work through any trauma they may have experienced, abuse, we're using this as a scapegoat. And the fear is that if you're identifying that, okay, this child is on the spectrum, fine, they can't be keeping secrets in schools from parents. Parents are the primary caregivers. And if that child starts to transition, unbeknownst to the parents, they're not able to give that child the support that they need to be safe. Maybe the parent doesn't know that they've been abused. Maybe they don't know they've had a trauma that's driving some of this.
Right.
And that's a very slippery slope.
So I think people could take away from this also that we covered the fact that the lack of education right now for children, reading, writing, math.
Right.
But based on what you said, you can confidently say that they're also not teaching children the ability to deal with some turmoil where they're immediately sending them off to for therapy, well, I'm confused about my sex. So, okay, well, then, we'll give you X. You're going to be X today.
Right.
Instead of
Right.
teaching children, you know what? This is how you deal with a little turmoil in life. Let's sit down and discuss it. Let's bring your parents and discuss it collectively, and we'll resolve it from there.
Right.
Instead, like you said, everything's being kept a secret.
Right. And not only like the typical turmoil that teenagers experience. I've worked with kids that had serious sexual abuse history that parents didn't know about. And as we started navigating throughout the therapeutic process, as I'm trained to do, a lot came out. And we realized that, these girls are binding because they wanted to be anything but appealing and attractive to the opposite sex because they had been abused by them. So if you are missing that one piece to the puzzle, you cannot just affirm something without digging deeper. And God bless people working in the schools right now, because it's got to be so difficult. But there are teachers and other staff in those schools that really mean well, but don't understand and don't have the extensive training to deal with these types of issues.
Well, because unfortunately, through evil Phil Murphy, he has schools now in the business of co-parenting. When the last time I checked, I don't recall any parent signing a waiver to agree to
Right.
co-parent with government. And that's what's going on here.
Right. And I think, and I think that's the other piece. I mean, when we send our kids to public school, we don't give up parental rights. Right. So regardless of how the school officials or the state or Governor Murphy or the State Board of Education feels about gender affirming care for minors, they have zero right to affirm a child's gender identity against their parents' wishes. It's wrong on so many levels. What we do know is that this is happening. I know that Europe is way ahead of us here, and there's so many more children now that transitioned during these years, and now are adults regretting it. The suicide rate is sky high for those who transitioned under 18. So we're really doing our youth a huge disservice, and also parents are under attack.
Well, that's just it now. They've created the battle line is now it's the school administration versus parents, instead of working together to make a better learning environment. Now they're involved with this now. And listen, it all comes back to the governor, the assembly, and the Senate, because they failed the children of the state of New Jersey. I mean,
they sure did.
If you're an elected official and if you cannot stand up for a child, you have no business being in office. If you can't stand up for a parent, you have no business being in office. Here's what everybody needs to understand. Elected officials, meaning Board of Ed. You're not there to be an activist. You're there to be a representative. And you're not representing anyone right now, but you think you're representing the superintendent, the union, and the governor. First thing from the truth.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, as a parental rights advocate in the state, I get questions all the time from parents like, how could this be true? How could this be happening? We talk a little bit about the gender affirming care bill that Zwicker is sponsoring. I can actually share that's S3592. And that bill states that anybody, not just the parent, somebody can act on behalf of the parent, could be a school official, whoever it may be, and they can take that child for gender affirming care in our state, because New Jersey is a sanctuary state for that, right? And it could be against the parents' wishes. So now these children are being taken for gender affirming care or encouraged to go for gender affirming care without their parents' knowledge, and making irreversible decisions, medical decisions that they're not equipped to make. I mean, we know that a child's brain is not formed till they're well in their 20s, but we're encouraging this at this age. It's criminal.
But it's like anything, right? If your child gets injured in school, what happened? They call you up. You have to go to the hospital, sign off on getting stitches. But however, in the world of Zwicker, who is a dangerous individual, who I feel is obsessed with child mutilation, you can without permission of the parent, you can go and do a sex change surgery, because now New Jersey is the state of child mutilation.
Right.
It's just incredible.
There's a lot of misinformation, and I hate to sit here on political lines, but there's a lot of misinformation that comes from the far left saying, "Oh, this is just ridiculous. Nobody's taking anybody for gender affirming care. Well, it is happening. I've seen it. I've heard it. We have parents calling all the time saying this happened to me. Kids are being taken for hormone blockers. I don't know if anybody knows what that means, but kids are given Lupron. Lupron is a drug given to sex offenders to chemically castrate them in prison. And Lupron abruptly stops the puberty process. When that happens, these kids can become sterilized for life. So maybe a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old starts to say, I don't feel like myself, questioning the identity. Listen, we're not saying to tell this kid they're crazy. We're saying let's navigate this very carefully and make sure that we are not encouraging this child to make life-altering, lifelong decisions underage when, 9 out of 10 times these kids can't have children, or these adults, once they become, can't have children. They embark on a journey of lifelong surgeries. This is happening. There's lawsuits popping up all over, not only the state, but the country.
I always say it seems to be we have elected officials and school administrators who are obsessed with stripping a child of their innocence, their youthful innocence.
Right.
And that's where all this is going. So,
Yeah.
I as being a former detective, it's like something like this, you put the pieces together with the 5756, and part of the putting everything together with the evidence, now we'll go to the library books. We have keeping things from parents, then you have the library books is all part of the puzzle to building the case of the fact of what you and I are discussing, how the ultimate thing is about walking these kids to get sex change surgeries.
Right.
And I know I consider you an expert on this because you've really shed light on this matter with the library book. So let's get into that now.
Yeah. So I think that, talking about children losing their innocence, I realized, I think the curtains were pulled back. My rose-colored glasses were taken off about 4 years ago when Murphy and his wife pushing this extreme sex ed curriculum that so many don't realize the implications of it. And, really essentially pushing sex for pleasure at a younger age versus just teaching sex ed for safety and development. And that was a fine line that was not only crossed, but leaped over. And parents' rights were steamrolled. So we were told, oh, you can opt out of these discussions, but we're seeing that that's not actually true because these concepts are being interwoven in all of the curriculum. So that brings us to the library books. So when you find books in a public school library so sexually explicit and pervasively vulgar, you have to question why they're there, right? A lot of parents are being attacked, being called anti-LGBTQ, because not all, but the majority of the books that are so pervasively vulgar are of that subject. But the issue is not the subject. The issue is the content. And we're being attacked saying that we're anti this, anti that. It's the content. It's the sexually explicit content, and it's the location of the books. So if these books, as they are, exist in a public library or on Amazon, I'm not going to speak to that because that's other people's decision whether they allow their children to read this content or not. But parental rights are being stripped from the parents who say, I don't want my kid being exposed to butt plugs and all of this pervasively vulgar material from as young as 13. Some school districts, these books are being found in the middle schools, elementary schools. So what's happening is parents are speaking up, as I did, as some of my co-defendants did, and we were sued by the high school librarian in our town for defamation. And what we're seeing is more and more parents are afraid to step up. The law is being weaponized against parents for protecting their children. And to speak, you could probably speak as a former law enforcement officer, how the obscenity law plays out. And the reality is, it really is illegal to share this type of material with minors.
Well, I just want to give an example. So if a child's in school on their Wi-Fi and attempts to access a porn site, it's blocked. You have no
Good point.
access to it. But however, you could walk into the library and sit down. You could be sitting down next to somebody with a book, with pictures of butt plugs and strap-on dildos or whatnot.
Yeah.
So this is where the argument comes in. It's paid for by us, the taxpayers. I do not want this stuff in the school libraries on my dime, okay?
No.
If you want your child to learn about this stuff, you go on down to the bookstore or Amazon, you order it for your child. Other children sitting at the same table should not be exposed to this stuff.
Right. And I have to say, it makes me feel sad as a mother that there are people saying that these children who are struggling on the LGBTQ spectrum need to, quote unquote, see themselves in the literature. Children, minors, preteens, teens, even young adults, they have a right to learn and develop in their own way sexually without being objectified and being minimized to butt plugs, a healthy heaping of lube, as it talks about, and all of this pervasively vulgar material that they are pushing onto them.
Yeah, I mean, when you look here, you have encouraging researching fantasies on the internet, encourage joining online sex communities. Porn is fun, it's sugary treat. I mean, this is disturbing.
Yeah, I mean, in America, where we have so many adults suffering with porn addiction, let's just push that younger and younger.
Right.
And the reality here, too, is that let's talk about the real issue. In America, we don't allow children to have unfettered access to any type of material that's vulgar, sexual, and whatnot. There's ratings on movies. You know, back in the day, you couldn't walk into a store and buy a Playboy if you weren't 18. There's rules and ratings for a reason, to keep kids safe. But now all of a sudden, this push comes, and because Governor Murphy says this is okay, and we're going to have Senator Zwicker sponsoring bills to protect this material in schools, that our kids have to go to school and be exposed to this against our wishes, it's absolutely unacceptable.
Well, it's not normal behavior for an adult. And, we have this other slide up right now. We have hearings right now being held in DC about, Zuckerberg's there, TikTok, about the sexual content and the harassment and how it's been, like you said earlier, caused some children to commit suicide. But yet, in these radical Democrat states, and this is not you talking, I call them Marxists. The Marxists, and they're basically masquerading as Democrats, because the things they're trying to do to children, to the nuclear family, really speaks for itself. But
that's a good point, Mark, too, because we look and in our world today, there is that line drawn in the sand, and it's like you either have an R next to your name or you have a D next to your name. But that's not how I see this. This is about protecting children. And I have so many Democrats that either are a part of our Roxbury Parental Rights group, Moms for Liberty, all different groups that say, listen, my political views are more moderate Democrat, but I don't stand for this. But they're afraid to come out public with that because of how their party would attack them. But they're in this fight with us. This is not about Democrat, Republican. This is about protecting children and protecting them from being sexualized.
Well, it's our responsibility to protect children. It's like when you get elected, your job is to speak for those who can't speak for themselves. And the same thing as a member of law enforcement, you're there to protect people who aren't able to protect themselves. When someone calls for help, it's no different here. I mean, I've responded to sexual assault scenes. Let me tell you, it's nothing that I don't even want to discuss them, because there's so much, like you said, trauma involved that alters an individual's life. And then when you have a confused child and you have school administrators pushing this type of material on them, I mean, it's a recipe for disaster. I mean, you're talking about changing someone's life forever. And these puberty blockers, like you said, it causes suicide, all kinds of issues involved.
Right.
But also, let's get to the thing, sometimes you got to follow the money. Let's face it, these surgeries are making a lot of money for people.
Yep.
And
I mean, it basically creates lifelong patience, because once a 13-year-old embarks on that journey and has a double mastectomy, in terms of infection and surgeries to just look and feel normal, it's lifelong. And I think that these kids aren't equipped to make that decision so young.
Because it's different. You're altering the body structure. So
Right.
one medication to alter the other medication, it just becomes a revolving door of different pills and everything.
Right.
But
And I do have to just say, as a mother and a mental health professional, one of the most effective approaches with a child while they're navigating any developmental stage, psychosocial, is really to just validate the person they are inside, not what they appear as on the outside. So loving that child through all of these difficult stages is so critical. And they're robbing the parents of that ability. Because of course, people are saying, oh, well, if they're not telling their parents, then the parents aren't doing a good job of having an open relationship. That's not true. What we know psychologically about kids, and when they start to hit their teen years, they start to push the parent away. It's like the process of individuation. They want to individuate, they want to separate. And then the parent kind of becomes that like temporary enemy, right? The one who's setting those limits and keeping the structure and the boundaries in place for them. And the more you validate the child without their parent, the more damaging that is for the child's psyche. And
I have to wonder, like growing up when you had the girl who's, the tomboy, like would that girl have been sent to the office and been told, you're really a boy? It makes you wonder, right? When you think about it, but it comes down, let a child be a child, let them figure it out. The parents help them along the way, let them enjoy their youth. I mean, this isn't necessary. That's why I get into the whole ideology thing. Yeah. And listen, like you said, there's allowing a child to develop with their parents is the way to go. And it doesn't matter your party affiliation. Unfortunately, we have people who think otherwise, and that there lies in the problem. That's why you have all these radical, dangerous bills being put up by the Zwickers on the world. Listen, Zwicker's a dangerous guy. I'm sorry. As a woman, what do you think of a grown man, meaning the governor, waking up in the morning, calling his chief of staff? You need to put a meeting together with other grown men, some of whom think they're women, and let's develop some type of, strategy here where we can start targeting people's children. I'm sorry. Anybody with a working brain cell would have to question, like, what's their ulterior motives? Like, what's going on inside them? I would never think about doing that.
Right. And I mean, you talk about follow the money. This runs so deep. So you look at Planned Parenthood and you look at Garden State Equality, and you got to really dig deep to see why they're doing this. And that's a loaded topic for another day. But, I think that our children are being sold out for money, and parents need to wake up and join this fight with us, because we can't do it alone. I mean, we will continue to speak out and advocate for all children, the safety and well-being of all children. But we are taking a lot of heat and we are getting hit left and right. So we need more people to stand up and get involved. I always say, do you care at the end of the day? Do you care more about your children and their future, or woke public opinion? I mean, we have one chance as parents to get this right, and it's now, because we see that line has been drawn in the sand.
Yeah, you're right. Because years from now, as a parent, if you have a child that has problems or hurt, committed suicide, you're going to say to yourself, wow, I was silenced because of the cancel culture, because of what they wrote about me on Facebook, people who hide behind keyboards and have a lot to say. In the meantime, they won't show their face at me. Listen, I'll be honest, I don't encourage any violence, but I have no problem with a concerned parent getting thrown out of a board of ed meeting because they're very loud about what's going on. I have no problem with that at all, because that's his or her right as a parent. And I'd like to see more dads involved than getting removed from meetings because they're pissed off that their daughter has to be subjected to a boy dressed as a girl going to the girls' bathroom and saying to girls, because I know for a fact this is going on because I had parents call me asking a girl, oh, I have tampons, do you need one? That's not normal behavior. That's a psychological issue. And that instead of getting the boy help, they're playing into it. You hear the stories about, the furries and the kitty litter. It's all factual. The left loves to try to say we're MAGA, concerned parents are extremists, domestic terrorists. We talked about weaponizing law enforcement against parents. Well, here's the reality. Phil Murphy has done that. We have an attorney general, Matt, I call him Plankton, because anybody watches SpongeBob, that miserable creature, Plankton instead of Plankton. will tell you that it's a disgrace that he's using taxpayer money to not only intimidate parents, to sue school districts who are right. Yeah. You're there to do what's best for the child. You're not there to do what's best for Phil Murphy in advancing his political ideology on public education, what he feels it should be. And what's scary is that we have his wife running for U.S. Senate. That woman has no business being a senator. I don't want to turn this into a political thing, but we have to touch on it because the facts are the facts. Because if it wasn't so political, Zwicker wouldn't be so obsessed with child mutilation, because that's what it is. We could say, I know sometimes people don't like to hear it like that, but it has to be delivered like that because that's the facts.
Right. And I think that I'm hearing so much that, Zwicker's sponsoring these bills to quote unquote protect librarians and this and that. The reality is parents are under attack. I mean, you see it with our lawsuit. We're being attacked, accused of all these different things that are untrue. And then in the community in which we live, and even in the state, we're getting death threats and attacked left and right. And, this is what causes parents to not stand up, to not speak out, because they're afraid. But I'm here to tell you that you don't have to be afraid. I mean, the threats that they make are not more important than protecting your child. I mean, the weaponization is unreal, but you see now lawsuits popping up on the other end. I mean, we have a countersuit right now in place, and there's parents now suing school districts across the state for socially transitioning their children against their knowledge. There's several right now. So I think that parents are starting to fight back, and they are starting to say, not my kid.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned that, because, Phil Murphy's team likes to say that's not true. But as you just said, it is the truth. People are fighting back now. And I think more parents need to get engaged. But when I watched a few board meetings, the moment a concerned parent gets up to speak, you hear the background. There can't be a civilized discussion, because if it's not what they, and I am saying what they agree with, the other side who promotes this stuff, all of a sudden we're bad. The big thing is now back to the MAGA parents, whatever they think that is.
And that's ridiculous. So we are always called bullies. So if I speak out and say, no, this is unacceptable, and this is how I see things, I'm not a bully, because I'm standing up for what I believe and I'm sharing my viewpoints. But what happens is when we speak, even effectively and respectfully, we are then, called names and yelled at, and the whole squad comes out. I mean, we were accused during the last Board of Ed campaign of having funding from Moms for Liberty and from quote unquote right-wing extremist groups. We have zero funding. We are a bunch of concerned parents fighting at the grassroots level. And what we have seen is there is one side being funded politically, and it's the left. And that's become very clear. Dems for Democracy with Milanowski is throwing a ton of money, millions. The American Library Association, who I have to mention is having heavy influence on Board of Eds across the state. So ethically, they're not supposed to be swayed or accept anything from outside interest groups. But yet we have the American Library Association, their library Bill of Rights implemented in most schools. They're the ones pushing these books. They're the ones attacking parents. They're giving librarians money to sue parents. So we really need to take a step back and start seeing the reality here of what's happening.
Well, we also have Planned Parenthood who financially supports Democratic candidates.
Right.
I know there's a new video out now of what they feel about virginity, and it's pretty graphic.
Right.
But I just want to read what a Democratic councilwoman in Old Bridge, New Jersey, Jill DeCaro, posted on X after a curriculum meeting, because there were parents there who were opposing the sex curriculum. Was very disappointed by tonight's curriculum meeting. So much hate, so much misunderstanding of what's being taught. I applaud our administrative team for standing strong and trying to answer every question that came their way. I truly am scared for the future of this district. So that's the response of a Democratic councilwoman, how she feels about concerned parents.
That is just her virtue signaling and trying to push their issues onto our schools and onto our children. The reality is this is happening. We have teachers that are either sending us anonymous messages or saying, can we talk privately, because they don't want to be outed. So here you have teachers that are in this difficult position where they're being forced or in a lot of ways encouraged to teach these sensitive topics that really should be between a parent and a child. And not only are they being pushed into this ring now, their money is going towards it. So the NJEA is funding political campaigns. So we have teachers who are also parents in the community saying, I don't stand for this. I don't want my money going towards this. But they are deathly afraid to stand up against the union because, God forbid, I mean, what would happen? Their lives would be made miserable. Well, I mean, we saw how the union came out and attacked us when we were sued.
Right. Well, that's around. Well, here's the thing. What about, does this law called cyberbullying? How are school superintendents preventing their staff to bully concerned parents on social media? That's not supposed to be allowed. It's supposed to be setting an example. No. Now there's a page in Old Bridge called Old Bridge Residents of New Jersey. All they do is slander people. You know, they said that, you know, they posted on there about me that I did a video encouraging people to shoot blacks. Well, they still haven't produced that video, calling people corrupt, attacking concerned parents, board members. And then when you search social media more, it's all over. But yet, none of these employees who are on there doing this is being held accountable. Right. So we're supposed to be, this whole group that supports this transgender stuff and affirmed care, which we're loving, we're caring. Really? Do you read any of your posts, what you write about concerned parents? You know, you talk about hypocrisy. The superintendents alone should be called out for not enforcing these things in the school districts that they're supposed to be in charge of, because they really, the inmates are running the asylum, as we say.
Right. I mean, all districts need to get back to basics, teaching academics.
Right.
Any of this distraction should be removed. Any distraction from academic learning needs to be removed. I mean, we are failing our children left and right.
Yeah, I think we need to increase the standards on how we evaluate teachers, the hiring process, because there seems to be more activists being hired than educators.
Yeah, and I hear it's a shame because we have teachers who have been in the game for a while that are looking and counting down the days till they can retire when they have whatever 20 years on whatnot. And this is really a shame because these are great teachers that really teaching is a calling. These teachers are there for the right reasons and they can't wait to get out because they're being put in such a bad position.
Well, that seems to be in all these blue states. All levels of public servants can't wait to retire because of their being put in a bad position. And you're right, there's a lot of great teachers. But here's the thing, right? Right now, people will be watching. They're going to say, "Oh, Mark and Kristen are targeting teachers." No, we're targeting the NJEA, the union. They're no longer a labor union. They are a political action committee. Okay, exactly. They have brought them into that. They brought themselves into politics. So right. I just want to make that very clear before anybody starts, misinterpreting what we're saying, because they love to do that whenever I discuss the NJEA, they always put a spin on it. So I just wanted to clarify.
And listen, I stand with teachers too. We have wonderful teachers in our district that are working hard to support kids in their academics and really don't want to be teaching this stuff. They say, we want to teach the academic content. They don't want to be crossing those boundaries because then they are getting attacked by parents and they shouldn't have to be in that position. That's not what they went into the field for.
Well, that's always it with Phil Murphy. He puts everybody else out there and let them take all the criticism while he just sits there with his silly expressions on his face, and he lets everybody else take the heat for it of what his decisions are and his bad policies. He hasn't. Right. I want everybody to think out there. I don't think we're making this a political thing, but the fact is, name one good thing Phil Murphy has done for the American citizen, the taxpayer of New Jersey, the voter. He hasn't done one good thing, especially not for your children. He hasn't done anything to address learning loss, to address all these psychological issues created by his own constitutional lockdowns. And remember, in New Jersey, we had extended school closures.
Right.
So just factor that into everything. I feel, I feel for teachers. I feel for these children, the children who are locked down and have to make up now. It's a difficult time. But staying with the parental rights, as we know, the parents has a constitutional right to direct the upbringing of their children.
Right.
I know we talked about that. So I just want to read this for all these individuals out there who want to attack concerned parents and label them. I want you to factor all this in right now. Court declared in Washington versus Glucksberg that the Constitution, specifically the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment, protects the fundamental right of parents to direct the care, upbringing, and education of their children. Now, I know Phil Murphy goes by the Bill of Rights is above my pay grade and could care less about the law, but that's the fact.
Yep.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
And
that's even being used as a weapon against us. So we have people coming out against us saying all parents have the right to direct the upbringing of their children. And that is absolutely 100% true. So that doesn't mean that because you want your child exposed to this over sexual content or pervasively vulgar material that it needs to happen in schools. You don't have that right to say that my taxpayer dollars go to that. So you have the parental rights to access that material in a free public library.
Right. And I want to get to this. Schools are not responsible for the spiritual or moral development of children. Their parents are.
Right. So, So I strongly believe in a parent's ability to really instill those morals and values in their children. And it is up to us religiously, morally, which direction we guide our kids in. So what's happening is it's creating a moral dilemma for our children. We may be raising our children, bringing our kids to church on Sunday, instilling certain morals and values in them. And then they go to school and everything that they're learning at home is being challenged and attacked at school. And that creates such a dilemma. And it needs to stop. I mean, talk about discrimination. Christians and Catholics are under great attack. I mean, the faith community as a whole. I mean, we talk about Muslims and Christians and Jewish people coming forward and saying, we don't stand for any of this. And how dare they push this on our kids? So it's just a matter of how many people are going to be willing to stand up and speak out against it.
Right. It's just so many layers here. Attacking the nuclear family, DEI, CRT, this affirmative care. Then they came up, let's keep parents in the dark. Let's not keep them involved. Now, what's your thoughts on this attack on female sports? I mean, we have that going on now.
Yeah, I mean, just that to touch on what you just said. So, mama bears are coming out in protection of their children, right? And we need the dads to come out in protection. So it's very clear why they're trying to remove the parent, right? You said that now they're trying to keep secrets from the parents because if they separate the parent and the child, the kids are a much easier target. And I know that sounds crazy, but this is what's happening. And right along the same lines of 5756, the policy that is implemented in most New Jersey schools, we're seeing part of that policy states that a child without a diagnosis, without anything formal from a mental health professional, can use a bathroom on any given day based on their deeply held beliefs of whatever gender identity they are that day. So we are allowing males in the girls' room. And, I'm more concerned. There's been so much hysteria over this. I'm more concerned with just the basic fact that my daughter can be in a bathroom. And I know, throughout their development, they feel uncomfortable as they start to develop and they need their privacy. And so any girl in a bathroom and a boy walks in, it's uncomfortable. They want that privacy. Why are we not affording that privacy to our girls? Why are we now sacrificing the girls and young women in the name of this movement? it's really disturbing. I mean, I have no problem with children who are struggling with their gender identity to use a specific bathroom, but not at the detriment of other children. So, you know, I remember growing up and being in a locker room and gym, and just, you know, when you get to middle school and you have to start changing, and even changing in front of the other girls becomes a little bit uncomfortable. Not to mention that there could be a biological male maybe struggling with their gender identity, and that's why they're there. But it's unacceptable changing in front of young girls.
What about discouraging them from participating in sports?
Right.
You know, is it going to be the common thing now if a boy is substandard competing against other boys? Oh, now I say I'm a girl. Now I'm going to take a scholarship away from a young girl who's worked. I mean, let's face this, sports out there, it is an enormous commitment by not only the child, by the parents.
Right.
Swimming, you know, hockey. I mean, I can go on and on. Ice skating.
Right. The
Where's
reality is there's biological males have certain abilities that are going to take out a female. For example, in swimming, they're going to be stronger, have more upper body strength, because they are biological male and because that is how they're made. So to say that it's fair for them to compete in the same category as a biological female is just ridiculous. And our country is allowing it. And then, you know, attacking these young girls. Riley Gaines is a phenomenal spokeswoman for this issue, but attacking those who speak out and say, listen, we've worked our whole lives for this and we're being beat by biological males. It's unacceptable.
I know. I didn't realize, you mentioned Riley Gaines. I was reading into when she was saying when Leah Thomas was in the locker room and he was walking around erect, and these poor women had to be exposed to that.
Yeah. Right. Talk about trauma.
I mean, right. And why is she the bad person in all this? Why are the women who are in that locker room, young women, why are they the bad person in all this? How about he gets out of there? How about because he's let's face it, he sucked as a swimmer and he couldn't compete against men.
Right.
You know, and here they are. I mean, here he is taking away championships from them. You know, Riley Thomas was a championship swimmer. I mean, Riley Gaines. I'm saying Thomas. Sorry about that. Didn't mean to offend you, Riley. But yeah, it's just terrible. I really feel bad for these young girls because they seem to be the forgotten ones right now.
Right.
For some reason, and it is political. Sorry, the party who say they're a party, right? They're the party of women's rights. I guess when it conveniently applies and for a particular conversation, because they seem to have forgotten about women's rights, women's freedom when it comes to the bathroom, locker room, sports.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have to call it out. We have to expose it for what it is. It's once again, you know, it's the application of rules and laws when it's convenient.
Right.
But yeah, you know, let's start wrapping this up. And whenever I get into this, sometimes I'm lost for words, which is, I'm sure everybody out there is surprised to hear, but it's just disturbing on so many levels because, let children be children, let parents raise their children, let children enjoy the whole school environment growing up. And there's nothing wrong with being confused at a certain age. That's the whole thing of life and enjoying yourself and growing up. But I hope people who are tuning into this, we're able to shed some light on things and really expose some things that are actually going on, even though they're being denied. But I want to say it once again, we need parents to get involved. The mama bears are there. Where are you dads? I want to hear some dads at board meetings yelling, why are you doing this to my daughter? Where's her rights? You need to email your superintendents. Listen, if you don't, I understand some people aren't good at speaking publicly or you're afraid of cancel culture. Email your superintendent.
Right.
You have a right to know. He's being paid for by the taxpayer. Demand answers. So you have defend the parental rights. Or can you just tell everybody about that before we go?
Yeah. So we have a wonderful attorney representing us, John Coyle. We have the support of Bill Spadia, who's a friend and who launched this website for us, www.defendparentalrights.org. And it links right to our Give, Sing, Go. So if anybody feels impelled to donate, please help us continue this fight.
Thank you so much. And let me say hello to Christina. I know she couldn't join us today. She had some things that were going on scheduling wise, but hope all is well with her. Send my regards there, Christina. Keep the fight, keep the good fight. But thanks for joining me, Christina. As
Thanks for
always,
having me.
it's always a pleasure to talk to you. Always,
You
and
too,
I
Mark.
appreciate
Thanks.
you taking the time out and your expertise. I mean, people really, really learn a lot when you talk. And once again, thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
And everyone, I'd just like to thank you for joining today's podcast. The gloves are off. And as always, stay informed. Find the facts. Don't believe everything you're hearing on social media or reading. It's facts before acts. And once again, God bless America, and tune in next time for the gloves are off.